What's good, y'all? It's your boy Havoc with Final Round. We got the fight for Undisputed going down tonight. Errol Spence Jr. versus Terence Crawford. The title for pound king in boxing is up for grabs. I'm forking out the money for this fight, as I hope everyone else is, because these two fighters deserve it. And this is a great spectacle for boxing. I think this could be a legendary night. The stylistic matchup between these two may be one of the greatest matchups in the history of the sport. I know that's out there, but I'm just saying it's possible. Now, whether they live up to the hype and they put on a show is up to them tonight. It's yet to be seen, but I genuinely believe this is one of the best stylistic matchups you can see, okay, in the sport of boxing throughout the history. Once again, yet to be seen, but the potential is definitely there. But I'm not going to be too long-winded. I'm going to break down the fight. I'm going to give you my prediction. I just want to say before I get started, I have no dog in this fight in the sense that I have emotional ties to one of these fighters. I'm not from Texas. I'm not from Nebraska. I don't care for any promotional banner, whether it be PBC or Top Rank or whatever Terrence is, being an independent contractor. I have no allegiance to any of these fighters. Now, I am biased towards my pick based off of what I think their technical prowess is, right? Whoever I pick, of course I want them to win because it's my credibility on the line. But I'm not picking based off of emotion. I'm not picking based off of the fighter I like. I'm picking based off of the stylistic matchups and the technicalities, okay, and the IQ. So that being said, I believe Terence Crawford is going to win this fight. I can see a TKO most likely, anywhere from round 6 to 12. I think it could come at any part of the fight, tell you the truth. I think Terence Crawford is capable of that. We saw him take out Kell Brook pretty early with a jab. So I wouldn't underestimate that happening in the early rounds. Now, I think the earlier the rounds, the less likely it is. And I don't think Spence is going to come out guns blazing the way some people think. I don't think he's going to come stepping. I think he's going to be boxing the first few rounds. He's going to try to box. You saw it with Mikey Garcia. You saw it with Danny Garcia. I believe you saw a little bit with Ugas. Spence didn't come out, you know, with a ton of pressure. He kind of came out a little bit more conservative, picking his shots, pot-shotting down to the body with the jab and the cross, slowly breaking down the opponent, and then he started to pour on the pressure, cut the ring off, and drop heavy lead to the heavy leather to the body, and lots of volume. And I think that's going to be the same thing in this fight. Spence is going to try to pot shot to the body with the jab and the cross. He's going to try to establish that southpaw jab, and then he's slowly going to try to put on the pressure as the fight goes on. Now, if he successfully lands his jab early on, and he's landing those pot shots to the body, that spells a lot of trouble for Crawford. I think, and you'll start to see Crawford dissipate in the later rounds, 6 to 12. You start to see his legs go. He's going to start sitting down more. Those body shots are going to take effect, and you're going to start Spence's weight will then become a factor. Look, I'm not of the mindset. I don't know why we're still doing this, thinking that size determines fights. We saw that with Usyk and Anthony Joshua. Clearly, that size doesn't determine fights. It's really based off of skill and technique and style. So, to me, if Spence wins this fight, it's not going to be because of his size. It's going to be because of his boxing IQ and boxing ability. Okay? That's what it's going to be about. The size will come into play, right, as the fight goes on. If he's able to implement his game plan, sure. But if Spence wins this fight, it's going to be because of his boxing ability. But here's the thing. I don't think Spence is going to be able to land that jab easy. I think every time he goes downstairs, there's going to be consequences, okay, because he's facing one of the best counterpunchers I've ever seen, okay? And he's not like Ugas. He's not like Mikey Garcia or Danny Garcia. Sure, those guys are fairly good counterpunchers, but they're not Terence Crawford. They don't have the footwork of Terence Crawford. They don't have the dog of Terence Crawford, and they don't throw punches in bunches when they're countering like Terence Crawford. I don't think they have the speed and power at the level of Terence Crawford, okay? I remember a lot of people watching this fight, Shawn Porter. A lot of people thought I was crazy saying that Terence Crawford was going to get Shawn Porter out of there, okay? I don't think Shawn Porter ever been knocked out or TKO'd when he faced Crawford, but I said he was going to get Shawn Porter out of there one way or another. A lot of people thought I was crazy. A lot of people were saying Porter, you know, is a great fighter, and which he is a former champion. But a lot of people thought that Shawn Porter was going to give Terence Crawford hell, and you know, some people made the argument that he was up in the scorecards. I think Crawford had complete control of that fight the whole time. He was the ring general, and when he heard what was happening on the scorecards, you saw him go ultra instinct and take Shawn Porter out, which I said would happen. I think a lot of people are underestimating Bud's abilities. They think it's just athleticism. They think he's just, you know, one of these guys that he's just a good athlete, and that's not the case. This is a high IQ guy, very technical fighter. The way he's able to step back and counter, punches and bunches, and then place those shots is absolutely phenomenal, and that's what I'm saying. I don't see how Spence gets away with landing his shots and not feeling the consequences of that. I think there's going to be a toll fee every time Spence throws his shots. And I think over the fight, you know, either Terence Crawford's going to hurt him early, or Terence Crawford's going to get his respect, okay? Is going to get his respect, and that's going to change completely how Spence fights, which I think is going to happen. I don't think Spence is going to have a sitting duck. I don't think he's going to have a sitting target, a punching bag. He's just going to sit there and take it like Ugas and Garcia and the Garcias. I just don't see that happening with Bud Crawford. I think he's going to make Spence think. That's another thing. Spence is going to have to deal with the mental pressure of Crawford, because trying to think in the ring and box technically is a very exhausting thing if you're not used to doing that. And I think Bud's going to be able to do that. I also say this, do not be surprised if Bud walks Spence down at some point in time in the fight. And another thing is, although Spence is a good, somewhat inside fighter, I think a lot of people overestimate how good of an inside fighter he is. I think compared to Crawford, I think it's completely different. Spence is the type of guy, he needs to break you down methodically first before he can even get into the inside. And he's not the type of counter puncher, if at all, he's not the type of puncher who's trying to intercept your punches. He's trying to frame you and hit you and break you down methodically. Terence Crawford is the type of guy, he's intercepting punches, okay? Intercepting your punches, countering them in combinations, okay? And that's going to be a lot of trouble for Spence, in my opinion. And there's levels to this game. There's levels to inside fighting. There's levels to countering. There's levels to footwork. Spence has a 50-50 chance, barely, in my opinion. I had it 60-40 in favor of Crawford at one point, but I'll say this. I value the jab in boxing, and I value a good body attack that's consistent and high volume. Those are two things Spence has. And then you throw in a little cherry on top. Spence is a southpaw. And that's what makes Spence unique. Really, when you look at Spence, he's pretty straight up and down. Very vanilla fighter. Nothing spectacular. He has a jab. You know, he throws his jab. He lands it. He wants to put pressure. He wants to cut off the ring. He wants to break you down methodically to the body. And then he wants to pour on the pressure, hopefully TKO, knock you out, or win on the scorecards with ball. It's pretty straightforward, pretty straight up and down. It's not complex, but he does it very well, and he's very fundamentally sound, okay? High guard, you know, but that weapon that he has, that effective jab and that volume to the body, to me, that gives, if you have that in your arsenal in boxing, and I say this to young fighters all the time, if you got a good jab and you got a good body attack, you're going to be hard to beat. It don't matter who you go against. You're going to be hard to beat. You stand a chance against anybody, and then you add the level of talent he has, and then on top of that, he's a southpaw. That adds more dimensions to him. Now, I'm not saying Errol Spence is purely one-dimensional, but he's not as dimensional as Terence Crawford. Terence Crawford Like, I always bring up this example. What kind of military do you want? Do you want a military with 1 to 2 branches, or do you want a military with the Army, a Navy, an Air Force, a Coast Guard, a Space Force, etc.? Marines. Spence has an Army, and he has a branch of Marines. Terence Crawford has it all. Okay, he can attack you land, air, sea, space. And I don't know about you, I prefer to have it all. Not to say the smaller army can't win, because sometimes the smaller army has an elite group, an elite division of fighters. But I think it's going to be a little too overwhelming in this matchup with Terence Crawford. For me, it's what you value. That's who you're going to choose in this fight if you're not emotional about it, or you're not picking based off a geographic location. Okay? It's about what you value. I value high IQ. I value a fighter who can adjust and adapt, okay, over a good pressure fighter. I'm going to value that over a good pressure fighter. For me personally, I think Terence Crawford is bringing a lot to the table. I think people are going to see the subtleties of boxing tonight and realize how great Terence Crawford is. You know, sure, it's not as badass as Spence. He's coming to you, he's stepping to you, he's throwing every shot with bad intentions, putting lots of pressure. Sure, it's not as sexy as that. But, you know, the devil's in the details. The devil's in the details. And I will say this, Spence being a southpaw, that is very interesting. That's what makes him unique. Because if he wasn't a southpaw, you'd be pretty straight. You'd be very vanilla. But because he's a southpaw, he's able to land that jab very effectively. You don't see that too much. You don't see too many southpaw pressure fighters who land consistent body attacks and then furthermore land their jab consistently. As we know, when you face a mirrored stance opponent, it's very hard to line up your jab. Spence has mastered the ability to do that. And that's what makes him very difficult to do. But I think Bud is gonna be able to adjust and adapt. He may fall back on the scorecards. He may start slow, but I've seen it way too many times to doubt him. And until somebody proves me wrong, I'm not gonna believe that Spence can beat Crawford. He's gonna have to do it because I'm not betting against him. I put Crawford in that Tom Brady type category. Even if he can lose, I'm not picking against him because he's Terence Crawford. I've seen too many examples early on in his career to where I've doubted him, and I didn't think what he was doing was very intelligent or methodical, and I thought that he had all these holes in his game. But time after time after time after time, he's shown me that there's a method to the madness. Okay, he's a winner, he's a dog, and he's gonna find a way to come out on top, even if he falls behind. Just like Tom Brady. He may fall behind in a game, he may lose a season, may not make it through the playoffs or to the Super Bowl or win the Super Bowl, but he always comes back and he finds a way to win and get to the top. That is Terence Crawford. I'm not doubting. He could lose tonight. There's no doubt he could lose. A good jab, a good body attack, a slightly bigger fighter in the southpaw stance. Yeah, there's a chance Terence Crawford could lose. I'm not underestimating that. But you got to make me a believer because I put my stock and value into what Terence Crawford does. He's a multi-dimensional fighter who can make adjustments constantly. He's brought up his power, carried his power into a higher weight division. Okay, and he's bringing his skill, his technique, and he's in phenomenal shape. I'm not betting against it. If you want to, go for it. I'm not. Okay, I'm not. There's levels to this game. But, like I said, Spence brings the most important punch in boxing. He brings a little bit of awkwardness being a southpaw, and he has a hell of a body attack. And that's what Spence or Crawford has to watch out for. If Crawford does not check those body attacks, if he does not match them in some shape or form, it will catch up to him in the later rounds and he will be broken down. The good news for Crawford, though, is that I think he can catch Spence at any time. I tend to see a TKO 6-12, like I said earlier. I think it's possible early on, but I don't think Spence is going to come stepping early in the fight. Okay. Now, I like what Crawford did at the press conference. He was sitting there, and I think he was trying to play mind games and maybe try to get Spence to be the aggressor, okay? Because that falls into what Terence Crawford does best, step back and counter. You know, step back and counter. But I don't think Spence is going to take the bait. But I appreciate the effort on the psychological warfare on Terence Crawford's end at the press conference, because he said this. He said to Spence, "You better not step out of line." And that was a very disrespectful comment, very condescending comment that Crawford made towards Spence. And obviously Spence did feel a certain type of way, because he's like, I ain't one of your kids, bro. I ain't one of your kids. You know, he took that personally, but I think Spence is pretty emotionally stable, and I think he's smart enough to understand, like, look, I'm not going to get outside myself. If I have to, I'm going to box the first few rounds, and then I'm going to slowly put on the pressure and bring it to him. But I think that Spence, I don't think he's going to come out guns blazing. I think Spence is going to try to pot shot to the body with his jab and his cross. He's going to try to slow down Crawford, and then you'll start to see him do what he does best and put on pressure and cut off the ring and break his opponent down to the body with high volume. My thing is, I think as he attempts to do that, he's going to get countered very badly. Watch out for the right hook in this fight from Terence Crawford. The right hook could spell a lot of trouble for Errol Spence in this fight. I've seen him get clipped a few times, okay, especially in that Ugas fight. And one thing I noticed about Spence is that he likes to throw that right hook, and he'll overcommit to it, or he's not properly balanced. And if he misses, he does not have a center of gravity, and he gets clipped with that right hook. You saw it in the Ugas fight. He lost his mouthpiece. He got hit a few times by Danny Garcia. With that right hook, I think he's open for that. And we know Terence Crawford has good looping hooks. I would like Terence Crawford to also implement an overhand right. I think that could be a very effective punch for him, but I think the go-to punch for Terence Crawford is going to be that right hook. Okay, and I'm very intrigued. I'll say this. I'm very intrigued to figure out how Terence Crawford, what stance is he going to come out in? What is going to be the predominant stance he looks for in the fight? I think it's going to be one of those things he kind of feels out as the fight goes. And I definitely want to see how he's going to eliminate the jab and counter the jab of Errol Spence. Because if Terence Crawford eliminates the jab and counters over the top of it, or counters that jab in whatever way early on and discourages Spence from utilizing it, that's going to spell a lot of trouble for Spence. If Spence cannot land his jab, especially early on in the fight, he's in trouble, because he's not going to know his distance. He's going to be fighting blind. He's not going to be able to land his body shots, and he's going to be a fish out of water completely. A fish out of water. You have to land your jab. If you see Spence landing his jab early, if you see him landing those body shots, pot shots to the body early, that's a very good sign. Okay, and we know you can touch Terence Crawford. You can hit him from time to time. Okay, you can. But I think overall, I don't think that's so much a flaw in Terence Crawford's defense as much as it is him taking chances and risk. You got to understand, you got to risk it to get the biscuit. I think one of the unique abilities that Terence Crawford has is he's willing to hang in that pocket a little longer, and sometimes he gets tagged. You saw it with Mean Machine, right? You saw it with Gamboa. Sometimes he hangs in that pocket a little too long, not because he's defensively irresponsible. I think he's trying to make reads. He's trying to make certain reads, and he's trying to set up certain counters to commit to those shots. There's a reason why he's a great finisher. There's a reason why he's getting guys out of there. That's because he's committing. He's committing to taking out his opponent, even if he has to take a shot. And that's the junkyard dog in him. And I think the combination of being skilled, technical, multi-dimensional, bringing his power up in weight class, I think that spells a lot. And on top of that, being a dog, To me, Terence Crawford is like a Marvin Hagler mixed in with a Floyd Mayweather. The IQ of Mayweather, but the abilities of Marvin Hagler and the nastiness of Marvin Hagler. That is a hell of a combination. The intelligence of Floyd Mayweather, the high IQ, the adaptability. That's what we're dealing with here. A generational fighter. And that's why I think he's going to win this matchup tonight. And I think, I'm going to be honest, I have no idea how Terence Crawford is going to approach this fight. I have no idea, but I think this is the beauty of what he does. I think he'll be able to do whatever he needs to because he's a multi-dimensional fighter that can make adjustments. If Spence runs into a wall, okay, even if he has success early on in the fight, but if Terence Crawford makes an adjustment, what is the next adjustment for Spence? Okay, and what happens if he has to make another adjustment, even if he does make one? Where does Spence go from there? I think elite boxers, generational talent, they have that ability to make those adjustments. I think that's Terence Crawford. Spence is a great fighter. I think he has a high percentage chance of possibly getting the W, but I'm not betting against Terence Crawford. I'm not doing it. Point blank period. Terence Crawford, TKO, anywhere from round 6 to 12. Comment down below, like the video, subscribe if you're new. Tell me who you think's gonna win the fight and how they're going to win it. This is your boy Javi. We'll find a round. Get at it.